Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum. On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I are joined by a special guest. Tim Miles, the former Nebraska coach, was kind enough to take about a half hour, 35 minutes out of his day to talk with us about his experience as a coach at Nebraska, his experience coaching against Indiana. He had a winning record against the Hoosiers in his time at Nebraska, and shares some really interesting stories about his first time coaching at Assembly Hall, growing up watching Indiana games on TV. And make sure you stick around for the end, the story of when he broke into Assembly Hall back when he was in his early 20s. It's a great story. We also ask him who the most difficult IU player to game plan against was. So we go into that, talk about coaching, a wide-ranging conversation with a guy who's really open, a good storyteller, and was just really generous with his time and insight. So we appreciate Coach Miles for coming on, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation with him on Podcast on the Brink. This episode is sponsored by SeatGeek. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's like they're so big they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. So what if their site's annoying and doesn't have the events you want? The real question is, how easy could it be if those ticketing sites actually cared? Well, SeatGeek does. And what is it that makes SeatGeek better than the rest? Well, a quick look at their app shows over 50,000 five-star reviews. How's that for customer satisfaction? And they get those reviews because they offer a better process. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, then rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10, and SeatGeek displays all of the tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see exactly where your seats are. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It remains the fastest and easiest way to find tickets, and I'll be using it throughout this college basketball offseason for baseball tickets, concert tickets, and then obviously once the football and basketball season start, it's a great place to find IU football and basketball tickets as well. And SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code, download the SeatGeek app, and use the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, today for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code BRINK for $10 off your first purchase. All right, here now is our conversation with Tim Miles. Okay, well, we are joined here on this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink by longtime basketball coach, college basketball coach, former Nebraska coach, Tim Miles. Tim, just to start out, and we were, kind of just talking about this a little bit before we started recording. I just want to say, and I think a lot of IU fans will agree, over the time that you were at Nebraska, really enjoyed the personality, the humanity that you brought to the sidelines and to the press conferences. So, just wanted to kick it off by saying I'm sorry to see you go. I think Big Ten basketball will be a little less entertaining without you there. Just enjoyed the time that you were there at Nebraska.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I grew up, in South Dakota watching Big Ten basketball. And, to be a part of that for 7 years really was, it's like my wife told me, I said, I want to be a Big Ten coach someday. And, she said, you should have said for how long, because you were, and then they got you. So maybe we could have done that. I want to be for 25 years or something like that. She said, you need a measurable goal, Tim. But speaking of IU, when I grew up, Indiana at Assembly Hall had the, remember? So, okay, we all know the one visual of Coach Knight throwing the chair, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this low camera angle from behind that first set of bleachers, behind the benches, and you can see that, right? Well, now the game is shot from way up, and so when you see an IU game on TV, you see a normal shot like you do every other arena, which is that, first deck, shooting it down, and you can see the whole court sometimes. But in the old days, IU, you just had that very small area that you could watch. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so for me, the moment of arriving in the Big Ten was my very first year. I was at Nebraska. and we're playing at Tom Crean's got Oladipo, Zeller, blah, 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 everybody, right? And so we practice there. And when you practice there, you go down to that same old deck where they used to, shoot, and you video your practice from down there, just like when you saw Bobby Knight. So I didn't realize that the next day I start cutting tape, and we start watching tape from us guarding our scout team because we practiced there the night before. And I literally got chills because I could remember like old IU games playing, Purdue or Illinois or whoever it might be. And that camera angle brought back, like, for me, childhood memories of watching Big Ten games on Sunday afternoon on CBS when I was 8, 10, 12 years old. So that was my first really welcome to the Big Ten moment. And I thought it was pretty cool that it happened at Indiana.
Yeah, man, I'm getting chills thinking about that. That brings back a lot of good memories. Wow. Alex and I were just talking before we went on here, looking at your career record, you were 5-4 overall against Indiana and 3-2 at Assembly Hall. What do you think it was that, allowed you to have success against some of those Indiana teams?
I don't know. There's nothing better than winning in Assembly Hall either, I'll tell you. It's pretty cool, even when they call me those nice names. But I'm very proud of that. It was a great place. I just think that probably favorable matchups or whatever. We had good teams at times, or we were playing great at times. I think one year we had a horrible year because how about this? I had a kid. It was doing great, and my leading scorer becomes a vegan halfway through the year. And when he became a vegan, his numbers went from like 41% from the field to 28% from the field.
Oh my!
38 from 3 down to 22 from 3 to be a vegan. And so hey, listen, you can stir up the chipotle guac, rice and beans all you want. Still not protein. Give him a burger, So I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend your vegan listeners, but it cost me a heck of a lot of games one season. But we won at Maryland, at Indiana, and I tell you what, at Indiana we had Isaiah Roby, who's in the draft right now, made some huge plays from the high post because Coach Crean at that time was junking up his defense. He'd run man, then he'd run a little bit of zone, and then he'd run this funky little kind of wasn't a triangle too. It was just kind of different. But Roby was killing it from the high post, and that was kind of his, introduction to the Big Ten too as a freshman. And we just had great luck there. I tell you another story. We were at one time I was 2-1 at Breslin Arena. So I'm sitting there. We're going to play Tom, Izzo, and Izzo always comes out before the game. And he sits there the whole time in warm-ups and watches both teams warm up and stuff like that. And not many coaches do that, I don't believe. I never had. But the first time I came out when every time I come on the floor, I try and come out when I see 3:27 on the clock. And because I remember I've been a head coach 24 years, the first game I ever won at Mayville State, when I walked in the gym, I remember looking at the clock and it said 3:27 in the warm-up. So I always try and enter the gym at 3:27 for good luck, right? So I come out there. By the time I get out there, there's like 2.5 minutes left, and Tom Izzo says, "Who the hell do you think you are, Bobby Knight? Get out here and watch these guys. Let's talk." So every year at Breslin, I would go out early and just sit with Izzo and chat it up. And so I'm out there, and so we had lost my first year and won 2 in a row at Breslin. So in all my infinite wisdom, I said, Coach, next time I win at Breslin, I might be the second all-time leading winner in Breslin Arena. Ahead of Judd, who I don't even know if Judd coached in that place, and right behind you. And he goes, "Shut up, you prick," and this, that, and the other thing. And then we lost 3 in a row after that. So probably should have stayed humble. Kendrick Lamar, stay humble, baby.
Tim, I listened to your podcast a couple weeks ago with Jeff Goodman, and for those who haven't checked that out, it's quite entertaining. So I would definitely recommend listening to that as well. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, you mentioned you've been a head coach the last 24 years. now you've got a lot of free time on your hands. What have you been doing these last couple of months?
I watched a cooking show today. It's I'm playing golf today, tomorrow, and the next day, and I got rained out the last 2 days, I'm pissed. I'm going to get my golf handicap down. It's odd. I'm going to quit the bit right away. I mean, nothing. I'm doing nothing. I'm watching Billions and Veep. I'm trying to, do some things to reorganize some of the things that I had as program organization, on my computer. But, just think of it. For a guy like me who, obviously as a younger kid, you had your own team in grade school, high school, junior high, all that stuff. Went to college and practiced a hell of a lot more than I ever played. But, was with the team right out of college, started as a graduate assistant coaching, then an assistant coach the next year at an NAI school for 5 years, then became a head coach at the age of 28. And then 24 years later, you're out of work and you don't have it for the first time in your life. You don't have a team. And, it's interesting. One of the two things, one is when you get fired, one of the things they tell you, they hand you a letter and, and the letter, first of all, is legalese, right? So it's like a 1-page letter. And the first paragraph is, per bylaw, blah, 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 of your contract, we're firing you. Then the next one, it says, okay, these 3 things matter. And, you got to do this. Like you got 10 days to hand in your stuff, 10 days to clean out your office. But the first thing it says is do not report to work. And you think when you're getting fired, they tell you you're being fired, then they hand you a letter that says do not report to work. And you think like, yeah, no, Sherlock, yeah, sure, I'm going to go to work. Okay. But like 2 days later, I had all this stuff I had to do because you're trying to get everything tidied up or whatever. And it was like a week later because they'd already hired Fred Hoiberg. And I'm like, oh, I need this mailed and I got to do this. And I need help with this, like Word document on something. And I'm like, I'll just talk to Cheryl, our administrative assistant. And I'm thinking this, I'm getting a cup of coffee. I'm like, I'll just run in. I'm like, oh God, do not report to work. This is what they mean. This is where it comes through. I have nowhere to go. So I went to Office Depot for 3 days in a row and met the nice folks there. But it's just really one of those things that that's one thing that's odd. And the other thing is, so my kids went to Catholic school. And if you ever go to any school, like some of those schools, they have a uniform code. You guys realize, right? There's different schools around with where they have to wear their uniform, right? And if you ever talk to a parent, they'll say, oh, it's great because you don't have to bicker about clothes or what to wear or anything like that, right?
I say this every day as my kids go to Catholic school. I say this every day. Perfect.
It's awesome. Well, wait till they don't, all right? Because that's where I'm at. I've been wearing a uniform for 30 years. I always wear your team gear. Now you're looking at like, am I going to wear a flannel today? A black, first of all, I have no clothes. Other, now that I've thrown all the Husker stuff out. So I'm sitting there like, what do I wear? I don't know. What do I wear? Jeans or shorts? I don't know. And so it's just ironic that, now when you don't have your uniform, your team, there's little stuff like don't report to work and what am I going to wear today? And so, and other things like maybe I should shower. I didn't shower yesterday. Maybe I should shower today.
Tim, I want to.
It all pays the same.
I want to ask you, what is the thing about coaching, being a head coach, especially at the Big Ten level, and trying to win at the level that you're expected to win, that most fans and even beat writers, don't get? Where you read a comment or you see something, you're like, man, that is, so out of left field. These guys just don't get it. What are podcasters like us? Like, what are those things that you can't really know unless you're on the inside?
I think the level. So I say this all the time, and I don't think people quite understand what I mean. But so when you're the head coach, my point of view, oftentimes is especially if you're not, even if you're winning, it doesn't even matter. I found that out. But when you're in it right now, the forces that pull you apart are a hell of a lot stronger than the forces that keep you together. So let's just look at this. We all know what's the fable. where the kid puts his thumb in the dike and there's another hole in the dike, and the dam breaks or whatever, right? So we know what I'm talking about. Like there's a problem. Well, the amount of voices or what's going on, these are young guys, 18, 19, 20, 21, oftentimes. And so if you look at that kid and you say, all right, what's going to keep him on track for playing the way I want him to play, we as coaches, helping us play winning basketball? Well, probably me, our assistant, maybe some of his teammates, maybe not some of his teammates. The forces to pull you apart could be a lot of things. Could be the way what they see on social media. Could be somebody in their group. And when you look at a young person, they've got their parents, of course, that want the best for them. I want the best for 13 of them, not just one. So there could be a conflict there. So maybe we think you should be starting, not coming off the bench, or you should be getting more shots, or or they're playing you out of position, and it's not preparing you for the future. And then you've got some of his coaches in high school and summer in AAU. You've got trainers, you've got girlfriends, you've got friends or brothers or whatever it might be. Then you've got social media. Then you've got the rest of you guys, right? And so when you look at all the things that could affect a guy, like we had a kid, and he'd been playing great. And I was telling him, what I really love is how you're letting the game come to you. You're used to being a volume scorer, but now you got Palmer, you got Glenn, you got Copeland, and you're letting the game come to you. And I mean, you're just doing great. And you've had, 4 games in a row, double figures, over 3 assists. He's a sophomore, right? So, I'm thinking like, hey, he's getting it, and he's really a weapon. So the next game, like we had a great meeting. The next game, I'm reassuring him, watching him film, with him, like to reiterate what I like, what he's doing well, make him feel comfortable in what he's doing. He's really on board, feeling good. Next game, he goes out and just starts jacking outside shots, turns the ball over 3 times, gets beat right away. And this is an important game, a league game. I got to take him out. Hardly playing 14 minutes maybe, and he'd been playing 26. I'm like, hey, dude, what happened? What was up? He goes, yeah, coach, that's my bad. My parents were there, and I wanted to impress them. They hadn't been to a game in a month, and you just never know what's going through their head. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, everybody wants an answer now on why this kid had it together. What happened? What's wrong? And maybe you lose that game, or you don't play as well as you could have. Everybody wants to know now. What's now? And the other thing is, it seems like even media-wise, is they want to. It's almost like a football. Well, here at Nebraska, it's almost like a football mentality. If you win 3 in a row, oh, we're going all the way. We're going to win. We're playing 35 games, not 9 or 10. So it's just everything's like this is a defining thing, and basketball is an organic, deal. So what the media, I think, don't know, what the other people don't know is, one, these are young kids, and everybody, and it really, a lot of things affect them. The other thing I don't like about the media is this: I have to make every game has to be, somehow I have to be relevant in my media market, because there's the space is so crowded in terms of how you guys are different from the next guys, or this beat writer is different from the next blogger, or whatever it might be, that everybody's stirring the pot a little more than they really need to be. Where really it's sometimes it is simple as, what, my parents were here and they haven't been here in a month.
Tim, I'm curious, as someone that's obviously you've sat in gyms during the summer and recruited at various levels throughout your coaching career. 2-part question: how has recruiting changed since you started coaching, and is it fun? I mean, that's at the most basic level. Is it still fun?
Well, yeah, it's it's life, and you deal with life. A lot of it is really fun. The relationships are really fun. What's not fun is when there's not transparency. When somebody is telling you something you want to hear. I think my most disappointing thing is when sometimes a young guy that I've recruited and got to know for several months. This isn't a little thing. And I mean, we probably talk on a, 2 or 3 times a week we're communicating, either talking to each other or texting or whatever it might be. We've probably met in person 3 or 4 times, and that guy decides to go to Purdue, and I don't even hear from him, and he won't take my call or whatever because he doesn't want to deal with the hard conversation. That's what's most disappointing. The level that that you have with like being fleeced or where there's really the only place there's really problems, what are usually pros, you know what I mean, that are having all things thrown at them. Like if you're Zion Williamson, you've had every thing on known to man probably against the NCAA rules thrown at you since you were 15. You know what I mean? When you're a special talent, I just use Zion as an example.
Right.
I'm not saying I don't know him personally, but I'm just saying we've all seen pros when we see them. Not guys that develop into it like Victor Oladipo, but this guy's a pro, And Romeo, you tell me that, his parents have done a great job. I've seen some of the journeys at least, and they've done a great job, I think, protecting him from some of that. But, when it comes to agents and people that don't have to play by our rules, those guys are really there. So that's really very little part of the recruiting. I would say just the lack of transparency at some times when, are you interested? Figuring out how interested a guy is in you, and then getting them to stick, getting them to stay and not transfer. It's like as soon as things don't go right, let's go. Let's restart. I call it the Nintendo or the video game complex, which is if things don't go right, just hit reset. Mm-hmm. And, let's start over. And I tell you, your marriage isn't that way and your next job's not that way. And so it's disappointing that college basketball can be that way, but it just is right now. And I just wish that, I just wish that there wasn't as much, movement as there is, but at the same sense, right? There's a very few things in life that people tell you that you have only X amount of years to do them. For instance, if I told you guys you only get 4 years to do your podcast, right? And you could take a redshirt year and figure it out for a year and do some strategic planning and get caught up, or you only have 4 years to drive a car or whatever it might be. There's very few things in life like that, but college sports and high school sports too are one of them, that there's a finite number of time you have to get it right. So from that aspect, to sit there and not be in a good position, I can understand kids leaving. Now, I would say most kids, even with all the mobility or all the movement now, transfer down, right? So if everybody, if most people are transferring down, what does that tell you about supply and demand? Right?
Too many scholarships.
Too many scholarships. I think we got to go down in scholarships.
I'm curious. One of the biggest, I think, talking points right now among IU fans is how long should it take for Archie Miller, I guess, to kind of get the program ramped up? And there's examples of coaches like Chris Holtman going to Ohio State, making the tournament the first 2 years. And then there's examples of a guy like Tony Bennett goes to Virginia, and it takes him a couple of years to get his system in place before he starts winning at a high level. I'm curious and I speak as someone that knows very little about coaching the game of basketball. How big in your eyes is the adjustment going from what Tom Crean was trying to do to what Archie Miller is doing from a basketball standpoint?
I think that, honestly, like it took me from the Mountain West. Now I was a small college guy. Arch has played high level. And I think the world of Archie and his staff. I think they're terrific, by the way. But it took me 4 or 5 years to figure out, okay, wait, my stretch four that I like can't even get a damn rebound in this league the way I want to play. So I got to really rethink this, like how I'm recruiting or what I need to look for differently, because guys I'm depending on really aren't making the plays that we need. Right. So there is, there is a way. And I thought Holt was lucky enough to be part of, I think he was there on oh man, I don't know, at Butler. I think maybe he came after Brad, but Holt was a really good player at Taylor of Indiana,
Right.
In fact, when I was at Northern State, we played Taylor in the 1991 NEI tournament in Kansas City. We lost 61-60. we had a side out that our scribe fumbled for a game-winning layup. And I think Chris was on that team and John Gross came later or the other way around. But Paul Patterson is the guy that I've kept in touch with forever. And I used to then sit behind his bench and watch them play. And I formed a relationship after those NAI national tournaments with Paul and still to this day. So I think, so my point about Holtman is that, he walked in, got the job late and had some excellent athletes. And he also had the player of the year in the league his first year, right? Keita Bates-Diop. And I don't think anybody saw that coming. And then this year, probably didn't have, I don't know, they made the NCAA, right? And he has a nice team. Now, next year, I would imagine he'll be better. With Arch, it takes 3 or 4 years to figure out the league. I don't care who you are. And so I would imagine that as Archie's gone forward and his recruiting is there and they're going to be okay. And something had to be up with Romeo last year with that thumb. You know what I mean? Because it just didn't seem right, even. And so, I'm not sure, and of course, you're not going to say anything like that and give away game plan and stuff like that or put your player in a bad note, especially if they're playing through whatever it might be. But these kids are they're playing so much basketball. So here's my deal. I think I would not be surprised if Arch's not ready to break through one way or another, right now or very soon after, and really be at the elite part of the league. The other thing is, you talk about Romeo being injured. We had 4 straight kids when I was in the last 3 years at Nebraska that needed surgery coming in as freshmen from bone spurs in their ankle or whatever. Need to clean up a knee because, they're playing all these games. They're getting the same injuries. And then, they're not getting the pro style rehab that Indiana's providing or Ohio State or Nebraska. And you get them and they're damaged goods. And so hopefully, I don't know if he's going pro or not or what he's declared, but I'm sure he'll be much better in the next year than he was last year just because of health.
Coach, this conversation's been amazing, and I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have time for a couple more questions? I know we're a little bit over what we...
I do. Thank you.
Okay, so first, I just want to get your thoughts, your reflections on the infamous sideline spat that you had with Tom Crean in the 2014 game.
The sideline spat with Tom Crean, here's what's ironic, is that Tom and I had to share a cab on the way to a Big Ten meeting that spring. And we chatted up like nothing ever happened. He reaches out to me via text when I was struggling and it looked like I was getting fired. He was very, Tim, I've been through this. He'd send me motivational stuff. He'd send me Bible verses, to kind of depend on. And I'm not the most religious guy you've ever met in your life, but, certainly believe in the big boy. And so Tom really was an advocate. But that night, we had a bad night. I thought Tom was, probably, I called it like the Belichick act, was going to do anything he had to do to win that game. And I took exception to it. And he had said something my way a couple times. And finally, all my assistants were like, Coach, don't listen. Don't. And I had kind of seen it. You kind of see it or hear it, but you don't recognize it, but my staff would recognize it. And then one of my staff guys says, that's like the third time he's talking to you, blah, blah. And I lost my mind. And so it was just one of those things, unfortunately, that happened. And Coach Crean and I, bounced back. And you don't want to be a sideshow, but credit to Indiana. They won the game that night. I tell you what, the one guy that doesn't surprise me that's in the NBA is Yogi Ferrell, because he was spectacular the next 2 years against us. He took it personal, I think, that Tom and I got into it, and he finished it off that night and the next year too. And he was a special guard. I actually saw him play at Park Tudor when he was in high school, and I was coaching at Colorado State.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's just this little young kid. And I remember talking to him after the game and just telling him, you're special, man. You're going to be a great player. And I didn't realize that was going to actually be thrust in my face years later, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
Well, that leads to the last question I wanted to ask you, and maybe you just answered it, but who was the most difficult IU player to game plan against during your time at Nebraska?
Yeah, I think Yogi. You know, I mean, I only was there 1 year, Oladipo, and because the league was even 12 teams like that, we only played them there. And when we played against that really good IU team that lost to Syracuse, I think, I had one rule. So we were going to, after the possession, we got a defensive rebound. Our rule was to walk the ball up, and as soon as the ball got across half court, everybody took a deep breath, right? So the point guard would walk it across, stand there, take a deep breath. Everybody on the team would, and then we'd start our offense. It was 25-24 at halftime, and they were getting booed. We were getting booed. Zeller was like 1 for 5 at the foul line, couldn't make anything, and it was great. So that was an exceptional team, obviously. But Yogi Ferrell, to me, could get his own shot, could get separation, could find guys on pick, pop, pick, roll, cutters with his pass. He was as good a guard, really, that I think I've ever gone against. And you know, there's just special guys out there. When I was at Colorado State, it was Jimmer Fredette and Kawhi Leonard. You know, Kawhi Leonard was a foul guy at the end of a game when he was at San Diego State. Like, we fouled him, you know, in a close game. Think of that, right? How he's progressed and developed. Jimmer Fredette was crazy, but really Yogi at IU, I thought, and that's no disrespect to anybody else, but he was a special. He's a Hall of Famer in my book.
Tim, what are you going to do now this upcoming season? Have you made any decisions on what you want to do? Are you going to go travel around, see college programs? Are you going to work on TV? Have you given much thought to that, or are you still kind of trying to figure that out?
Yeah, you know, like I say, I am trying to figure it out. And all of those things you just said are a distinct possibility. I'm definitely going to travel and spend time with coaches. You know, just to kind of look at again, all right, so how come one time our defense, I think it was 2 years ago, was like 38 or 44 in the country or something like that, which you'd think if your defense in Ken Palm is like 42 or whatever, that's pretty good, right? Do you think that's pretty good or not, guys?
That's pretty good.
I do.
Yeah, well, it's 12th in the Big Ten. You know, I mean, so you're like, seriously, all of a sudden you start looking, you're like, there's 11 other teams ahead of us, man. And so, I mean, I just think that when you look at this and you look at how to put together, you know, I think one of my mistakes was I don't think I ever built with the idea of winning a championship in Nebraska. It was the first place I ever just built to, like, hey, we just need to be good enough, collect talent. And you kind of lost your way, like, because when I was a smaller college coach, you're like, we're winning the championship. But then all of a sudden, I think you get a little intimidated, honestly, when you look at, there's Illinois, Maryland, Michigan. Hey, just keep going, right? And IU, you know, like, how in the heck are we going to win the Big Ten championship? So then you start just, all right, okay, how can we do well enough? And I've never coached like that. That was the first time I've ever coached like that. So I think get back to that championship thinking too is really important. Like, how are we going to win the championship? And of whatever league, even if it's back in the Big Ten someday, who knows? Although I don't think Michigan called. Did they have a coach yet?
Well, it's rumored that Juwan Howard is going to be the guy, apparently. The NBA guys are infiltrating the business, aren't they? I hope Penny Hardaway's got the recipe, that's for sure. Maybe Jalen Rose will come back to be the associate head coach. They might just bring the whole Fab Five back and make that the entire staff.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, one of them, they only get 4 on the floor, so one of them's got to be out again. So here we go. We got a problem, No, I think visit around, look at your, again, how you build your team. What really matters to winning. How can we be elite defensively, elite offensively? I really thought, and the other thing I think Tom Izzo, even though guys swept him this year, I really do think he's got the key to the test, the answers to the test. He plays a lot of guys all year. And then all of a sudden when there's an injury, one of those guys is ready to play. So he'll like give minutes, it seems like, back to an opponent, like, okay, we can make hay on this lineup. But, he's still, everybody's deep enough. Everybody's getting a little bit of run. Everybody's getting touches. They run so hard. and pretty soon they, wear you down at the end of the year or whatever it might be. And they might have some hiccups in between. And he might, again, like if you're playing chess, he might give up a pawn or a rook or something. It looks like a big game, but he's still got his queen and his big boy's ready to roll at the end of the year. And so I just think that, looking at, taking the emotion out of it, and spending a year just studying teams and spending time with guys. The guys I've already talked to several guys, about coming down. I even talked to Tommy Ostrom about coming down and seeing IU because I do respect Archie and what he does and all of those things, and have so much respect for Indiana basketball. Years ago I broke into Assembly Hall when I was a grad student.
Well, we have to hear that story.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about this. I know I got to go too, but so in 1991 or whatever, my buddy and I. When was the Final Four in Indianapolis with UNLV and all those guys? Right.
91. I was actually there as a 9-year-old.
Okay, good. So I would have been 23, 22, whatever it is, and so my buddy and I, we stayed for the Saturday games, and I think UNLV got upset by Duke. And didn't Roy Williams get ejected from the game, right? So, I mean, it was just crazy. And so my buddy and I take off and drive to Bloomington. Well, first of all, we go out to the Speedway. And there's cars out there practicing, doing practice runs. So we hop the fence, and we're in the bleachers watching cars and trying to time, we didn't have cell phones back then, but you have a watch. And so you try and time how long the track was, try and guess how fast the car was going. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff we did. Then we saw the security kind of coming our way, so we vamoosed out of there. So that was breaking and entering number one. All right. So then we drove down to Larry Bird's house, jumped the fence at his house in French Lick, and played one-on-one. That was breaking and entry, actually 3. And in the meantime, we stopped in Bloomington, and my buddy says, at the time, my buddy was at North Dakota State, where I became the head coach years and years later. I was at Northern State in Aberdeen, South Dakota, as an NAI coach. And so he was in grad school, and I was in grad school. And he said, so his former head coach at North Dakota State, his name was Irv Iniger, and they won the Big Ten. I don't know what year it was, right? And so there's a picture of Irv Iniger on the wall. He goes, we got to get a picture of Irv, and send it to him. So I literally go, and they've got these glass doors, and you know how you jack a door, like you put your foot on the other door and you just yank it with 2 hands. And so I jacked the door, and it popped real easy for me. And so we jack the door, we go in, we take pictures at half court. It's all dark. We walk up, and how steep it was, we couldn't believe I took in pictures. They're dark, taking pictures. You can hardly see anything. And then we found the pictures we wanted to. We got a couple pictures of us in Assembly Hall, and then we ran out of there. So those are the 3 crimes that the statute of limitations have run out now in the state of Indiana.
It was like a little Indiana sports fans, like fantasy weekend you had there. That was amazing.
It was a great day. It was a great day. I had a blast. So maybe that's why. Maybe I should have broken into every arena in the Big Ten at a younger age, and I would have had a hell of a lot more success. I'd still be coaching today.
Yeah, there was some good karma from Assembly Hall for you after.
Yeah,
after
no
that.
doubt.
Well, Tim, this was great. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And by the way, in this off season, if you decide to get into podcasting and you want any live reps, you can come back here and co-host with us anytime, because this is fantastic.
I appreciate it. Well, you put this out on Twitter, and I'll redistribute it appropriately. All right.
Yep.
I'm
we
still
definitely will.
Coach Miles. Yep. I'm still an internet character. There's still this fictitious guy out there that exists with his fat Labrador Retriever, and so hit me up, and I'll make sure and recirculate. All right.
Sounds
all
good.
Right, thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com, and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us, and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.